Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm glad you're here today. We're about to dive into an important and fascinating topic, beyond prejudice and racism. This presentation will explore the cognitive, social, and systemic forces that shape how we understand and experience human difference. We'll look at the psychology behind diversity, uncover what influences our perceptions, and discuss ways to foster greater understanding. So let's get started and explore these ideas together. Let's take a moment to examine how historical perspectives on diversity in the U.S. reveal the deep influence of societal norms. These norms have really shaped how we understand and experience difference, and in doing so, they've laid the groundwork for many of the inequalities we see today. As Viet C. pointed out in 2013, understanding this history is crucial. Now, moving on to the concept of social cognition and categorization. This is a natural psychological process that happens early in life. We instinctively sort people into in-groups and out-groups, and this categorization influences how we perceive others, how we behave, and even how we see ourselves. This tendency is often what underpins the us versus them phenomenon we see in society. Understanding these roots, prejudice and categorization, is key. It helps us see that these biases are not just individual issues, but are built into the very way our minds work, especially from childhood. Recognizing this connection allows us to better understand the origins of social division and inequality, and it sets the stage for addressing these challenges in our ongoing efforts towards diversity and inclusion. When we look at biases, especially racial biases, it's important to understand that they don't just exist in isolation. Instead, individual biases actually shape systems, like education, employment, or justice, and those systems, in turn, reinforce the biases. This creates a continuous cycle, where biases and systems feed off each other, making inequality persist over time. It's a self-perpetuating loop that's tough to break without addressing the larger structural issues. Now, it's crucial to recognize that these biases aren't just personal failings or individual prejudices. They are deeply connected to power dynamics, cultural narratives, and institutional practices that operate at a societal level. So, when we talk about biases, we're also talking about the broader systems that sustain and legitimize them. This is why understanding bias as systemic is so important. To truly make change, we need to look beyond individual attitudes and focus on transforming the structures that uphold these inequalities. This slide highlights how these reinforcing cycles operate and why solving inequality requires structural solutions. Let's talk about multicultural approaches, which recognize and value our differences. These approaches generally lead to more positive outcomes between groups, help reduce prejudice, and foster a greater sense of belonging. Of course, the effectiveness of these approaches can depend on the context, so it's important to understand that nuances exist. Now, on the other hand, we have the so-called colorblind approach. The idea behind this is to ignore racial and cultural differences in an effort to reduce bias. But interestingly, research shows that this can sometimes backfire. When we pretend those differences don't exist, it can actually lead to more stereotyping and prejudice because it erases the real experiences and identities of marginalized groups. So the key takeaway here is that these are two dominant frameworks in diversity and equity work, multiculturalism and colorblindness, and each has its own evidence base. Understanding their strengths and limitations helps us create more effective strategies to foster true equity and inclusion. When individuals feel seen, valued, and included, and I want to emphasize, not despite their differences but because of them, that's when true belonging moves from just being an ideal to becoming a real, tangible experience. It's about creating an environment where everyone's unique qualities are recognized and appreciated. When we foster this kind of inclusion, it helps bridge gaps and build stronger connections. This slide calls it inclusion, the bridge to integration, and I think that's a powerful way to put it. Because when we truly include others, we're not just adding people to a group, we're integrating diverse perspectives and backgrounds into the fabric of our community or organization. This is essential for meaningful progress, and it's at the heart of creating environments where everyone can thrive. So, as we move forward, Remember that inclusion isn't just a nice-to-have. It's the vital bridge that leads us to genuine belonging and collective success. Embracing diversity is really about creating environments that are fairer and more inclusive. When we foster diversity, we also strengthen our intergroup relations, which helps organizations and communities become more resilient in facing challenges. As Plout highlighted in 2014, this approach not only promotes fairness, but also builds a solid foundation for lasting growth. Now, when we talk about stronger institutions, what we mean is that diverse teams bring a wide range of perspectives and lived experiences. This variety fuels creativity, leading to better problem-solving and generating richer ideas. With more diverse input, innovation outcomes become more robust and impactful, as Plout pointed out in 2010. So the core message here is that embracing differences, whether in people or perspectives, really makes a difference. It's about understanding that diversity is a key driver for innovation and resilience, and it underpins the overall theme of building better, more inclusive environments for everyone. Let's talk about some of the psychological barriers that can hinder diversity efforts. Unconscious motivations, identity threats, and deeply held beliefs can all play a role in fueling resistance. Interestingly, this resistance isn't limited to those who outright oppose diversity initiatives. Even individuals who see themselves as allies can experience these barriers, often subconsciously. Diversity resistance actually exists along a spectrum. It can range from outright rejection, where someone completely resists the change, to reluctant compliance, where they might go along with initiatives but without genuine buy-in. And at the other end, there's full integration and active learning, where individuals embrace diversity efforts wholeheartedly. Understanding where people and organizations fall on this continuum is key. Recognizing their position helps us tailor our strategies to support lasting change. The idea is that resistance isn't static, it's a journey. By identifying where someone is on this spectrum, we can better facilitate progress toward genuine inclusion. This ties into our overall theme of creating meaningful, sustainable change within organizations. Now, let's talk about how traditional diversity initiatives often focus on individuals in isolation. But, as Keller, and Kang pointed out in 2025, meaningful progress really requires a combined approach. We need to blend psychologically informed interventions with structural reforms in how institutions make decisions. This means not just supporting individuals, but also changing the systems that shape their experiences. On this slide, you see three key concepts. First is individual tools. These are strategies that help individuals develop awareness and skills for inclusion. Next is systemic change, which involves transforming policies and organizational structures to foster equity. Then we have sustainable equity, emphasizing that lasting progress depends on integrating these efforts over the long term. Finally, the idea of bridging individual and systemic approaches underscores that real change happens when we connect personal development with broad institutional reforms. It's about creating a synergy, empowering individuals while simultaneously reshaping the systems they operate within. This holistic view aligns with our overall theme. Sustainable, meaningful diversity efforts require both personal and systemic transformation. The quality of contact between groups really matters a lot. When we think about intergroup interactions, it's important to be aware of both the potential pitfalls and the positive opportunities. For example, feeling anxious or activating biases can make interactions challenging, but understanding these dynamics is crucial to building genuine connections. As Viet C. 2013 highlights, being mindful of these factors helps us foster more meaningful engagement. Now, individuals who experience stigma often develop resilient strategies to navigate these differences. They might manage their identities carefully or reframe narratives to make interactions more positive. Recognizing these mechanisms is key because it helps us provide more empathetic and effective support. By understanding how people adapt to stigma and difference, we can create more inclusive environments and strengthen intergroup relationships. When we integrate psychological, historical, cultural, and institutional perspectives, we can move beyond simply seeing differences as sources of division. Instead, we recognize that these differences can become strengths that enhance our collective society. This approach, as Jones, DeVideo, and Vietzzi highlight, helps us build truly inclusive and equitable communities where everyone's unique background enriches the whole. A key idea here is that diversity isn't static. It's dynamic and continuously shaped by social processes. By understanding that social distinctions are created and recreated over time, we can develop more effective policies and practices that promote fairness and equity. This is what Plout emphasizes, using a multi-lens, comprehensive view to inform our actions. Looking ahead, embracing diversity as a dynamic process points us toward a future where integration and ongoing learning are central. It's about seeing difference not as a barrier, but as an opportunity for growth and innovation. This aligns perfectly with the overall goal of this presentation, which is to foster environments where diversity is truly valued and leveraged for collective strength.